So yeah, hello everyone, and thank you, Robert, for having me tonight. Judging by the wait list, as we said, there's a lot of excitement about this talk, so I'll try my best to make it worthwhile. And yeah, to begin with, just for fun, how many here have tried some form of VR? Be it cardboard to, oh, awesome, most of 60–70%, nice. And how many of you are some form of developer, be it apps, web, VR, games? The same people, pretty much. Awesome. It's a good mix. But yeah, so first things first, who the hell am I? And how come I'm standing here talking about VR? So, hi, I'm Daniel, and I love VR. I love it so much that it's practically what I do each and every day. Today, I work at Vobling as a VR consultant, helping various clients integrate VR into their, well, some case software, some case just products and their organizations. If someone's thinking like, hey, this VR thing seems cool, and they don't know exactly how to make something work, and then we want to step in, like, yeah, just optimize it and make it the best possible VR thing that it can be, no matter what it is. I'm also one of the co-founders and co-organizers of Stockholm VR Meetup, which has a humbling 600 members, so only a third of Tech Talk, but we're getting there. And it's kind of amazing. You know, it's been growing since just last summer when me and another guy, and no, we were three guys in a pizza place with no Wi-Fi and trying to see VR, and it was a mess. But yeah, the explosive growth that we had is really exciting and a good indication of the excitement all around Stockholm about VR and what's to come, just right here locally for us. But enough about me. I'm sure that coming here, those of you that haven't tried VR now in recent days, were thinking like, bah, humbug. VR was a thing in the 90s. It failed. It will fail again. And granted, it did. It came. It went. It was still like display on your face. It was still just a couple of things like shining in your eyes and making things move. But let's see how it actually really was back then. Let's watch a 90s VR. Let's hope that this works.
Fly over Mars. Take a trek through a prehistoric jungle. Tour a house that has not yet been built. It's called virtual reality, and as Jay Shaver found out, all it takes is a special helmet and a glove, and you're off.
You're gone, John. You're history.
I put it on, and suddenly, oh, I'm deep in a future world of fast-paced action. You're totally immersed in another world. It's like being there. You're in control of the universe. It's like you've got a movie living in your head. You've got surround sound, the works. It's everywhere you turn.
世界で初めての完全立体映像ゲーム機バーチャルボーイ。テレビゲームでは味わえない立体感あふれるソフトが次々登場。マリオズテニス、ギャラクティックピンボール、テレロボクサーなどが同時発売。バーチャルボーイ、販売店でぜひお試しください。
Yeah. So that was 90s VR. And if that's what you've come to expect for VR, I can't really blame you for being skeptical this time around. technology just wasn't on par with our own expectations of the technology and the fantastical marketing from some companies. The headsets were heavy and tiring. The experiences were nausea-inducing at best. And yeah, so Reality just didn't live up to the hype. And it's understandable that it left a really bitter taste in people's mouths and that it sticks to it even to this day. And maybe that's why it took someone from my generation to actually reinvent the system and reinvent the space and do something unharmed by the horrors of the 90s VR. So in comes this guy and his duct-taped VR headsets. So in 2012, Prana Lucky arrived with his Oculus Kickstarter, and a lot of news articles and sites have detailed all of the events, so I'm gonna just skip over all the details. But in short, Kickstarter happened, smashing a lot of crowdfunding records at that time. Development kits were shipped, and big companies started coming in from the right and left and just pouring in more and more money into the VR space. And today we're right on the cusp of the first commercially available VR headsets. So it's different this time. Well, for now, the tech is vastly improved, much thanks to these smartphones. We all have them, and they're basically just devices with high-density displays, really delicate sensors, and yeah, they're pocket-sized computers. And just stick them in front of your face, put a couple of lenses in between, and voila, you have VR. So this is Google Cardboard. And it's kind of fitting to start there, since we're here. This is what most people refer to as the lower end of the spectrum. And unfortunately, a lot of people just try to, they discount it really fast, just as a, well, that's not really VR. And that's a shame, because there's a lot of potential there that a lot of people don't actually realize. And I personally do enjoy more the high-end desktop and mobile VR headsets that exist, but to have something here that's cheap, it's literally cardboard, and it's the most open and accessible platform over the VR platforms today. Just take any phone capable of running a VR app or experience and stick it into the fold, and you have VR. It's just that easy. And you can be set up with your own experiences in like 5 minutes. Unfortunately, with the App and Play stores being what they are today, there's a lot of developers doing things that they really shouldn't do. And in VR space, that means that a lot of people get sick. And there's a lot of applications that are freely available for cardboard that just doesn't really work. Or in some cases can be defined as VR. But more on that later. Because, and as I said, this is a shame, because with the right content, this can literally transform people's lives. And Google has realized that, and since, I don't know if they've started to do that or they're beginning to, but they're shipping like free packets of smartphones and cardboards to classrooms all over the world to actually get them to experience field trips and historical events without ever leaving the classroom. And for some like us from Stockholm, and having historical sites and events happening all around us, that's okay. That's not too much, but for any other country or even any other city that's not a capital of any country, that this is a godsend for them, and being able to not deal with the hassle of, well, first of all, having to pay for all the money to have travel with a bunch of kids. That's a logistical nightmare as well. And just having a couple of cardboards with smartphones and being able to experience pretty much anything they want right in their classroom. So for little to no money, and to see these kind of things is really good. So if you want to develop for this, because this is the easiest to do so. It's just now you're getting the cardboard, so that's good. So you just go to google.com/cardboard, download the SDKs. There's a lot of different things you can develop in engines to basically any platform, be it iOS or Android or game engines or even web VR with JavaScript. And for those in the recording, I guess you can buy this at for $5 in hardware stores these days, which is pretty amazing. And just disclaimer: Google did not pay me or tell me to say any of this. These are my personal opinions, and I really think that it is really, really good. And it has its own space, and I think that for VR to become the mainstream thing that most of us really want it to be, then cardboard is something that's really, really necessary in the ecosystem. But speaking of higher end stuff, we have things like the Gear VR. I find this to be fascinating. Again, contrary to most developers, unfortunately. The benefits this has over something like cardboard is mostly comfort and the stable build. It's not just cardboard. It's comfortable to wear for long periods of time, and it even has Netflix these days. So yay that. On the flip side, this does come with a heftier price tag. The headset itself is around $99, but adding to that is a pretty pricey Samsung phone for around $700 instead. And despite this, it's proven to be pretty successful, at least as far as community support has been so far in development kits of this. And for developers like myself, it was a godsend when this actually came in stores, and not having to drag around this huge PC with the early PC development kits and having to drag around a PC for all of 2013 and 2014, and instead just being able to grab something like this in your backpack and just carry it around and stick it on people's faces and just so hey, this is VR. Hey, awesome. And the joy of people's faces when you put something on, be it cardboard or Gear VR for the first time with mobile VR even, it's really good. And I can't really express how much it's been changing our developments, our way of being able to actually demo and being able to put VR on people's faces. Of course, there is one thing that's all of mobile VR still lacks in comparison to desktop VR, to this day at least, which is positional tracking. And for the uninitiated, positional tracking is with mobile VR, you can only move around in one space at one point in space. You can look around all you want, but you can't actually ever move inside a virtual world. And today, or just recently, since last summer was the first commercially available development kit for it, and you actually could start moving around in positional space, looking at something like this. So you're no longer confined to one spot in space, and even without using any external input like gamepads or keyboards or whatever. And at first we got them for the headsets, like in the GIF, but these days we're starting to get them also with controllers, which is opening up a few fascinating possibilities. And before I start this video, I'm just gonna brief introduction. I'm gonna clip through a bit of it because I don't want to have you sit here for 5 minutes watching this. This is a video about with Glenn Keane. He's responsible for the main art behind stuff, movies like Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid, and using VR for, I think, the very first time, and using another application that Google bought recently. That was the wrong button. Yay. Let's see here. I think that's...
The flatness of the paper would go away and that I could actually dive in.
Here we go.
Animating the beast, I became the beast. I remember going home at night and my jaw just hurting because beast all day, he's talking like this and my back is all bent over and my neck was sore, and because I'm being him. I would draw not to do a drawing, but so that I could step in and live in that world. Today, all the rules have changed. By putting tools in your hand that can create in virtual reality, I can put goggles on and I just step into the paper and now I'm drawing in it. North, south, east, west, all directions are open now. Just immersing myself in space is more like a dance. What is this amazing new world I just stepped into? When I draw in virtual reality, I draw all the characters real life size. They are that size in my imagination. The character can turn. Ariel is actually turning in space. And even if you take the goggles off, I'm still remembering she's right there. It's real. That doorway to the imagination is open a little wider. The edges of the paper are no longer there. This is not a flat drawing. This is sculptural drawing. Making art in three-dimensional space is an entirely new way of thinking for any artist. What does this mean for storytelling?
So yeah, positional tracking, and I really do recommend you to go and watch the entire thing. It's really, really good. It went viral a couple of months ago for a good reason. But yeah, that immediately brings us to the next headset in line, the HTC Vive, which is the headset that back in March this year, Valve and HTC announced, and it's right now the only competition like on the same, trying to save the same market space as the more commonly known Oculus Rift. Not only did it promise to provide a larger tracking space that no other manufacturer had done before, it's also coming from Valve, the makers of Steam and one of the most highly respected game companies in the world right now, most highly looked up upon. And this was a huge contrast to Oculus at the time, since being bought by Facebook back in 2014. They've been seen to kind of betray their loyal fans and betray their hacker spirit, which a lot of people were sour about. So this coming along almost a year later made people jump ship over to this instead, and began an entirely new hype train for VR again. And for those of you knowing what I'm talking about, with the Facebook buyout, I personally don't worry too much about that, and I'm going to skip that whole discussion for this presentation because that'll take too long. But yeah, so right now the Vive is kind of taking the spotlight because this one is set to come out in December. This is next month, and the Rift still haven't said when the Rift is supposed to come out. Of course, it's come out sometime during spring, but when, we don't know. And this means that this might very well be the very first VR headset that people can, the first desktop VR headset that people can actually buy in stores, which will have a huge effect on whether or not, or what kind of wins the VR war, as some people are calling it. But the thing about this right now is that at the same time, it's a bit of a hassle to develop for. There's not a lot of these out in the wild, and only a handful of developers has actually gotten their hands on it. Even demoing this is kind of scarce and really rare, at least today. And leaving most of us other developers that doesn't have access to this, just without any potential to actually develop for the upcoming launch next month. But there are, of course, libraries, SDKs, and plugins for the various game engines that you can use to actually start to develop and get a sense of the tools and the code. But to actually, having tried this and the other headsets, I can say safely that you really need to try it before actually knowing how to develop for this, because it is a whole other experience than even the positional tracked headsets with the Oculus Rift AK2. But yeah, so if you're curious at least to check out the code, just search for Steam VR for any of the development platform of your choice. But that brings us to the poster child of VR, the Oculus Rift, the thing that kickstarted it all, literally, all over again. And it's had 2 healthy development kits right now, shipping about 200,000 of them, which and only stopped the selling of these just a week or 2 ago from their website, preparing for the actual consumer version launch. And as I mentioned, they were acquired by Facebook back in spring 2014, and it got mixed reactions, to say the least. There was a lot of hate on the forums those days, those weeks. But right now it does look to come ahead of the Vive in some ways, because it's had over 2 years of development kits in developers' hands, and it's been kind of not reading, but growing this development community that has had access to just their hardware and their SDKs and their own personal libraries. And this means that there's a lot of content brewing that's just geared for the Oculus Rift. Of course, hardware-wise, the Vive and the Rift are pretty similar, at least in terms of HMDs. Though, of course, the Vive is still a development kit. The Rift is not, in this case. And Valve and HTC hasn't actually said anything about the consumer Vive, so we don't know exactly how that's going to be in relation. We don't know the price of either of these. Even the Vive coming out next month, what it's going to cost? I don't know. No one knows, because they're refusing to let everyone know. And the Rift also are having motion controls coming, so they're not going to have that advantage in the Vive, but it's sort of room scale, but not really. They're promoting CD experiences, and the controls are going to be sold separately. And yeah, right now it's kind of a headache to actually see how things are going to go and how things are going to pan out in the end. With the status quo being right now, that neither party has actually said anything about their main HMD and kit since, I think, since beginning of summer. We don't really know much enough to say like who's going to win the VR war, or if there will be a winner at all out of these two. But what you can take from this, if you want to develop for it, is that right now they're shaping up to be similar, at least. Of course, they're going to be their own different systems with their own tricks and unique faults and benefits. But we'll have to see, again, how the Vive evolves from being a development kit to consumer version. But as this is the current state of VR, this is the current status quo. And with its with this being a meetup, I guess sort of mostly aimed for developers. I can't just stand here and not talk about development stuff. I had an sort of internal debate about whether or not to do any code, and I voted against it because there are just, I presented 4 headsets here today. There are at least 30 or 40 ones of your choice. And like 5 or 6 different development platforms for each in some cases. There's too many differences in code that you just can't pick one and take that as an example. What I can do though is go over a few basics that we've come to learn, all developers all around the world over the past 2 years, about what to watch out for and some guidelines for what to do when developing for VR. A few rules that's currently accepted as rules, kind of, but that you probably should follow. So bear that in mind. And these all, as I said, these all are true in some way or fashion, no matter what the platform you want to develop for. So first off, whatever you do, please do not make the user sick. This is something that's really hard for some developers to learn, apparently. And with many people who still haven't had their first experience with VR, this is crucial for developers to know in order to not, as they say, poison the well. And yeah, in that vein, just try to keep things in mind, like make sure that frame rates are always at above the minimum recommended setting for your platform. For mobile VR right now, it's 60 FPS. For PC and others, they are 90 plus in most cases. Even on PlayStation VR, it's 120 in some cases. And that's the minimum. And frame rate stutter is a bad thing in normal games. You like get a piece of lag and get angry, but in VR, it's literally your whole visible world being shaken up. So quite a bit more painful to experience. And to that point, when doing demos of software, when doing demos of your software at events and etc., please do not actually say to the user that they might be sick. Because if you're doing it right, they're not going to be sick. And you actually saying something that makes them think that, oh, I might get sick, in some cases make them sick, even though they wouldn't be sick. We tested this in the office, and it's scaringly true. The placebo effect is very, very real in this case. So yeah, don't tell them that they're going to be sick, because then they will get sick in most cases. Second rule, design for the platform. I kind of touched on this before, but really, design for the platform. And there are 2 points to this. First of all, if you're doing something for VR, you're doing something for VR. You're not doing web development, you're not doing app development, you're not doing a console game. This VR has its own design space, its own design rules, and just sticking to the good old true fashion of, yeah, these things apply to my 20 years of experience in gaming, for example, it doesn't hold up anymore. You have to really, really design for the platform. And secondly, think about where the end user experience will be. Is it on the Gear VR cardboard? Then don't aim for a room scale experience. Stick to having this person experiencing your thing in one point, is space. Limit the geometry. A mobile phone can't actually handle too much geometry and polygons. And if you're doing something that runs across devices, just target the lowest denominator. Just like you won't be able to run GTA 5 on your smartphone, you won't be able to run an Oculus Rift game on a cardboard. The hardware just isn't there. So develop for the hardware, design for the platform. Last but not least, experiment, iterate, and test. Even with the 2 rules I just said, there still are a lot of things that we still don't know about VR development. This is new tech. This is uncharted territory for most part. And as I said, it's been out 2 years. Phones have been out for almost, what is it, since 2007 that iPhone first came out. So that's 7 years, because the App Store came a while later, that we had smartphone development. And just now we're starting to get sort of a baseline of what we can and can't do. We're just 2 years in, and tech is always constantly evolving. So do experiment and do test. And bring in new testers on a regular basis to the simulator sickness point of don't make the user sick. Just because one developer that's been sitting there trying broken builds again and again and again, just because they don't get sick, doesn't mean that the end user won't get sick. So bring in new people, bring in new testers. Yeah, a question? I think it was on already.
So when it comes to testing, I guess different people have different physiological prohibitions or like preconditions.
Yeah. So
I'm very likely not to get sick, like when taking a train.
Yeah.
And I
so
know
you
other
need
people,
other people's advices, basically, because I'm one of the fortunate ones in that case as well. I don't usually get sick either. So I always have to like stick it on someone else's face and like, hey, try this. And
so you have to identify someone that's more likely to.
Yeah, but the thing is also when you bring in someone like that,
a number of testers, I guess.
Yeah,
like everyone.
The problem is when you bring in something like that that's kind of jaded to become sick over time, they'll get used to it and they won't be as sick. So then you need to bring in more people and in the end after that as well. So bring in more people, and last but not least, test some more, and then test again. So that's basically the current state of VR for now. What does the future hold? What do we have to look forward to coming soon? When are we getting the Matrix? The thing we're all waiting for. Yay, robot overlords. Well, let's start with the near future first. Games are prevalent today because of very good reasons, or 2 good reasons. Game engines and digital worlds that are interactive. These are 2 things that game developers have been using for over 20 years, ever since the early 90s with the Quakes and Dooms, etc. That's why most of what you see in applications today from the big companies are gaming applications, because they already know what it takes to have a player and an agent in the virtual world and having them interact with the world rather than vice versa. And they know this area very well, and they will continue to spearhead the VR development for at least a few years. There are, of course, other areas that are starting to catch up. With the recent openness of game engines like Unity and Unreal Engine, areas like architecture and film are starting to catch up. They're also doing virtual worlds and been doing so ever since we got computers. But the trouble here is that they are used to having like hours, minutes, in some cases, days and weeks to render one single frame of content. In VR, you might need to do 90 frames per second. And that's a huge challenge for some, not as much as other areas, but they're starting to learn and they're starting to catch up. And as it says, this isn't actually running at VR frame rates, but it's not far from it. And these types of content are starting to pop up all over the world now in crude, well, not crude, but early VR development stages. And following them, we have medical, military, academic institutions that are starting to catch up, except they actually never dropped out of virtual reality. Ever since the 90s, ever since the 60s, when the first VR headsets were being discovered and developed, VR has just been rising and rising in these spaces. And while these institutions often take a really, really long time to do something, they do have the benefit of having near infinite funds in some cases, and they're being able to experiment a lot more than most other fields are. Additionally, a lot of the foundations that we have today in our consumer VR do come from these fields, and it will continue to be that way for many years to come. And so if you're someone from these fields, then there are a few places here, even here in Stockholm, that are doing really good VR research. And it's a field to really look forward to, look out for. If you're what look out for, whatever. It's a field that's coming into VR really fast, and it's been here for now 30-40 years. Beyond that, what does the future hold? Well, many fear something like this, a dystopian future where you basically become so used to the virtual world and that you shun the real world for it. And while I personally don't believe that this will happen, I really can't see a world where VR won't change a few things. And as VR becomes more and more indistinguishable, that's a hard word. As it becomes more indistinguishable from reality, it's going to affect the world more and more. Of course, there's a long way to go before we're here, as Michael Alger from now Oculus Research spoke about in his keynotes in September. And as he explains, again, in a video that you should go and watch after this, these are just some of the areas that are required to progress in tens of years before we have true VR, something that's barely indistinguishable from reality. Right now, we have audio and visual systems that are just barely passable for our primitive brain, but we still can't touch the virtual worlds that we're using. We have some crude haptics that sense vibration, but not more than that. We still can't smell or taste, for better or worse, the virtual worlds. And we're getting there, slowly but surely. There are ways that are actually doing, there are some institutions that are actually working on things that do these things. Of course, it's a long way from being anything close to being consumer friendly. So again, what kind of future can we expect from this? I personally choose to push the field in one direction. Oh, sorry. Yes, the question. Yes.
So which of these areas is the biggest challenge that we have to overcome compared to what we have right now?
Yeah, all of them. I mean,
you mentioned that in some areas we're already, well, not there, but we're working or we're close enough.
Yeah, and that's with like displays and headphones. We can replicate the real world just enough that we're thinking like, okay, this is a passable replacement for reality in some way. It's not quite there yet. You can still see the pixels, for example, etc., but it's possible. But then with things like feeling something in your skin, not here yet. Having a sense of smell, not here yet. And okay, so I think my personal answer to the question is probably smell and taste. That's the furthest from. That's from my just anecdotal data. It's not a professional opinion, but that's what I see. But I obviously don't work in these research fields, So I don't know what's the furthest from the truth here, or the furthest from being a consumer level thing.
And what do you think is the main blocker? Is it the lack of developers? Is it technology, hardware, software? What is the main problem that we...
A mixture of everything. Of course, always money, just having the resources to make something. And thankfully, Oculus at least sees this and are putting lots of money, a lot of the Facebook money into just Oculus research in order to do more and more things for the next 10 years and not just the next 2 years and the next consumer version. We're actually looking forward and trying to solve these things. And so yeah, it's not a question. If I knew, I would be rich, I guess. And a lot of people are working on this all over the world, and just time will tell which area will be solved first. And yeah, I don't know the research well enough to actually answer what comes next.
I have another question. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about this later. You didn't mention the HoloLens.
That's because
is it later?
Robert? It's locked.
You were so close.
I was so close. I was done with the talk as well. So, but yeah, I'm going to touch on other things as well soon. Just one more thing, then we're soon.
Thanks.
So hold that thought a bit. Any more questions while we're at it? Okay, one more here.
Yeah, this is maybe not on the current state of VR, but I'm thinking when it comes to VR applications and the ergonomics. I mean, if you're designing like a game, I guess like the human body puts some constraints that are different from when using a mouse or a keyboard. Like if something happens right behind you, it's very difficult to turn your head like an owl.
Yeah, of course. And that's why we're
Is there any kind of like tips for when you're developing to how to like...
I would say that then that's like designed for the platform. And if you're using in VR, you don't want to be using keyboard and mouse. That's basically it. Of course, there are applications that are really good that do use it, as like work management applications, stuff like virtual desktop, which mirrors your desktop in VR instead, so you can work on it while wearing virtual reality. And those things are great, but going forward, as the VR-centric controls basically get more and more advanced, we're going to skip those parts and just have interactive controllers that go beyond that and enables us to actually enjoy this fully. And with the different motion controllers that exist, having something come from behind you is not a problem because you just turn and then there it is. And as long as you don't have that fixed space, and eventually we'll get like an virtual overlay and you can have like stuff being in the virtual one instead, so then it doesn't matter where you are, where your keyboard, it's always in front of you. So it's coming, but
then instead you have like accessibility problems, I would guess, if you want.
Of course, but that's a whole other thing. Again, there's a real good video. I'll put a link to this later. I actually forgot to put it in the talk, but there is a master student in a college in the US that I can't remember the name of. He's been doing at least 2 20-minute videos about just UX in VR that are amazing.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah. So I'll post a link on the Meetup page after this when I can have time to find a link. But yeah, what kind of future can we expect going forward? And my personal wish for how this will be is actually the same reason for why I actually got into VR. So I was 12. I had seen The Matrix. I hadn't really like connected the dots and said like, oh, that's VR. That was not a concept for me yet. And there was in the library in school library, and I found a book because I'm a nerd. I like books when I was a kid. Books are awesome. And there was this crappy youth book that I found, came out in 2002. That's basically detailed. It's a crappy youth book, so it's had this basic normal, like, this is this young male kid that is doing his adventures and everything, and everything goes well for him, and gets the girl, etc., etc. But some part way into the story, you start to encounter this big heroic character that are like helping the heroes over and over again. They're like, oh my god, this person is amazing, and how can you do that? And going to insane levels even in this fantastical VR world. And then suddenly, after a lot of adventures in the book, it comes to the beginning of a chapter where it's this white, serene, almost hospital-like room, and someone sits up for one of these VR beds that is the VR thing in this book, that you connect to virtual reality from the real world. And they sit up, and the book describes this fragile young girl, like 2 years younger even than the main hero in the story. And she hops up from the bed and into her wheelchair because she lost her leg when she was a kid from a car accident. And that was like, that was the same person. And me being 12, I hadn't read anything like that. And I was like, okay, this VR thing is really awesome. I want to do that. And that kind of set me on my way. And I was back in 2009, starting when I started college. I actually found some of my notes even back then from just being a mind map, A4 page, just described like, okay, this is VR and this is what we need to actually make it work. Of course, I was way off. I was going into things like nano robotics into our brains, injecting directly, then inspired by Matrix, I guess. And just 3 years later, Palmer, etc., comes out with their duct tape HMD, and just I'm going, okay, VR is coming here. I need to get on this. So my dream for the future is to actually help people to realize dreams that just aren't possible today, and to realize, to experience and get to see worlds that they can't see, and doing things that we can't do in this world. And with that, my question to leave you is, what kind of VR do you want to develop for VR? And let's open the floor. Questions? Anything? I can start with the HoloLens question. There you go, the white shirt. Yeah, the HoloLens is interesting. It's unfortunately another example of the fantastical marketing that 90s VR had the problem with. If you've seen the demos that they do, they present this wide screen, like, oh my god, you can see AR in the whole world. When actually today, the technology they're using limits to like this zone. You can actually see a representation in it in one of their demo videos. So they do show it, but they're hyping it up to be this fantastical thing that's just way, way beyond what they can do and what they know they can do right now. So it's an amazing piece of technology, don't get me wrong, but they're really, really overhyping it right now. And people's expectations are way up here when there should be somewhere around here. And so can't wait for it to come out. Can't wait to see what kind of application it brings. And I, like so many other VR developers, think that eventually VR and AR will just merge together and become one thing that we carry around with us all day. But yeah, can't wait for HoloLens. I wish their PR teams could be reined in a bit. I think, yeah, in the back.
So if I want to start developing for VR or like start playing around with it, where's a good place to start? Is it the cardboard?
Yeah, especially since you're getting a free one now.
Yeah.
And do you have a smartphone?
Yeah.
Then you're all set.
Of course.
So yeah, exactly. We all have smartphones. So that's the really, really easy way to get developing. And you can, as long as you look up the specifications for your phone, see what kind of level of graphics that your phone can handle in terms of 3D or 360 video, whatever you want to develop for. Check your specifications and design for the hardware, as I said.
Thank you, great tip.
Yeah, there was with the mic already, so.
Sorry. May I know what are the upcoming foreseeable ethical or even legal issues with the virtual reality development?
I want a thorough answer here. No. Okay. I want it from you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, some of us VR developers are kind of half jokingly wondering, kind of day by day, like when's the first death in VR? Like when someone's gonna die from either just a heart attack for being in an too intense experience. If any of you have tried horror in VR, you know what I'm talking about. It's intense, even with the resolutions we have today. And yeah, in terms of ethics, I mean, there are systems in place for even games, etc. today. I think we will start to adapt some of those as time goes on. Right now, it's kind of the Wild West because it's still just development kits and people are having free reins. But in time, there will be loss. There will be loss of lives. Just like people have died from playing World of Warcraft too long, people will die probably from playing VR games too long. People are stupid in that way, unfortunately. And I hope people are developers themselves will try to do whatever they can to prevent this. But in the end, I think it's unavoidable in the extreme cases, at least. But as to exactly what laws that will be required to be put in place, can't say. I think it will be an adaptation of what we do have today for digital content. You had it?
Okay, so slightly simpler question. So what's the equivalent of a Hello World app in VR?
Me being someone who develops, I come from game design background. I studied game design in Stockholm University, so I used Unity a lot. And right now, it's kind of like Open Unity, have a DK2 connected to it and press play. And you're in VR when you put on the headset. That's the most basic I know. I wish I knew more JavaScript, because then I could say how you do it in VR, web VR, because that's the most portable solution for any headset to just open up a browser and run a VR experience. It comes with its own its own slew of problems, of course, but. Yeah, it's, I would say, the most easy Hello World that I know of, at least that I know the way of how to do it. I just open up Unity, have a cube or something in the world, and just press play. And it's kind of easy. Okay, the cardboard doesn't connect to the computer, so it's another step. You have to build the app first, but it's basically as simple with cardboard. You just have to import some files first to just get that working. There in the back.
Compared to virtual reality, how far have we come with augmented reality?
I usually tend to say that AR, augmented reality, has all of the problems of VR and then some. So we're starting to get things like the HoloLens and even things like the Magic Leap that's mysterious and I've only heard actually works. They just released a teaser trailer that looks promising, but it's marketing, so who knows? I'm sorry to any PR people in the audience, by the way. It's, as I said, it's going to be fantastic when it shows up, but I'm thinking that basic AR has been here already for like 10 years, being able to track QR codes and etc. So it's already here. It's just the level of getting it to consumer level, which still has some time left before it's actually a reality. And I can't actually, to throw a number, I'd say 5 years. Then we'll have equally good AR headsets as we have VR headsets today. I guess, maybe, hopefully.
I'm sort of lucky that we never worked on the same projects when it comes to the skill of estimating time it takes to build stuff.
Yeah. I'm really horrible with estimations.